skeletons in your army, which are very good against the breakers and the rifles. You'll notice that his panda got weak, so he was able to pull it into the back of the fight and use the clarity potion to get some mana back on the panda, which is always a good idea if you think you can get away with it. You'll notice that Moon was timing his hitting Nilfgaard's towers. You know, Moon waited until Nilfgaard's towers were almost completed, and then he turned around and canceled them before they were all the way up, after all the peasants were gone, so there was no chance to repair. So that's another good tip in terms of microing these tower rush fights. And you'll notice that, you know, this isn't looking particularly good for Moon, but Moon actually was able to staff home several bears in the course of the fight, and he has his panda home too, because he just had to staff that home. So Moon actually has a sizable army at home, and he's healing up that army, and he's going to pick up a town portal scroll on that panda and TP in with the rest of his army. You know, as he brings another shredder to help him with the fight, and all of a sudden, you know, Moon has an army again, and he immediately staffs home that weak Dark Ranger, which is going to heal up and then use the staff of teleportation to join the fight again. So, you know, these are all just like nice little individual moves by Moon that allowed him to sort of get back into this fight. You know, if he hadn't used his staff well, and he hadn't used you know, that second town portal and the staff of teleportation and all that kind of stuff, he definitely would have lost the fight and probably would have lost the game. So this game, you know, in fact, you know, that particular fight, for example, was, you know, very, very close. And he was able to save a lot of units by good staff use, and then by some nice TPs, he was able to eventually fight Nilfgaard off. Even though Nilfgaard sort of won the main fight, Moon was able to get back into it and come back out on top. And at this point, you know, Moon is in you know, a very advantageous position. The thing about the human player doing a tower rush like that is that if it fails, you know, you tend to be in pretty good position. If you look at the food counts right now, Moon's actually up on the food count, and he has the tier 3 advantage next to Nilfgaard's tier 2 and slightly higher hero levels. So he definitely hasn't won the game yet, but he's in good positions just thanks to good micro in that fight. And so, you know, you'll notice that that Moon, you know, all the stuff that Moon did was very necessary in terms of, you know, making sure that he got an expansion up early game. He needed that expansion, otherwise he wouldn't have had enough gold to produce an army that countered Nilfgaard's army. You know, he wouldn't be on equal footing. So he needed to get that expansion up, and he needed to, you know, for example, make sure that he had, you know, staffs on both his heroes. And without those staffs, he probably wouldn't have been able to come back and win that fight. The staff of teleportation was helpful, you know, not quite necessary, but definitely helpful. You know, he needed, like earlier on, he needed to make sure that his lores got up, and he needed to make sure to get his tech, because he definitely needed bears to win that fight. So, you know, all these little decisions that Moon's making, you know, while they don't seem very major in and of themselves, sort of add up to him being, you know, barely able to push off that attempt by Nilfgaard. So, you know, it's all very important. You should be paying very close attention to all of these individual decisions. So, you know, this little, you know, back and forth game right now, you know, Moon was just in Nilfgaard's base, and so he knew to be near his expansion when Nilfgaard showed up. You know, this sort of, you know, army positioning is something that you should always keep in mind, where you don't want to have to waste a town portal if you don't have to. So if there's any way of you to know when your opponent's going to be making, you know, advancing on your expansion, you should use that. You know, for example, you know, Moon just sent out a scout list right there. Right there, he saw Nilfgaard's army approaching, and so he got into position so he wouldn't have to town portal. All of those, you know, small little decisions that end up saving him resources, which he can then use on stuff like, you know, more town portal scrolls, healing scrolls, more units. Just, you know, small good decisions that end up making a difference. And you'll notice that as Nilfgaard approaches, Moon immediately gets his wisps into position. You know, just using all the tools that he has, making sure that he you know, has those dispels at the ready, because they can end up making a big difference in the fight if you burn all the caster's mana, and the hero mana for that matter, and sometimes even dispel some water elementals, although I believe Nilfgaard's retrained to Blizzard at this point. always remember that when the human does reach to Blizzard, you have silence. Oftentimes it's better to not, instead of opening immediately with silence, just go ahead and let him get his first Blizzard going, and then silence him. A lot of times you can catch a human player off guard.
The great outdoors.
So you'll notice as Moon is waiting around for Nilknarth to attack, he makes good use of his staffs to buy some more scrolls and make sure that he's used all his resources, because ideally when you have a big sort of potentially game-ending fight like this, you don't want to have any resources in the bank when you make that fight. You want to have used them all. You want to be sort of at your maximum possible army when that fight actually occurs. So Moon's just making sure that he continues to have that. So you'll notice that Moon just makes good use of silence right there, making sure that his panda stays in good position and that he has mana on his panda, continuing using his breath of fire, and pretty much at this point his army is taking care of the rest with just a little bit of bear micro and a little bit of dryad focus to pick off these spell breakers and take out the casters. So you can see Nilknarth says good game, and Moon ends up on top. In a late game situation, the Dark Ranger Panda with Bear Dryad is, all things being equal, generally should beat an equal sized army of Archmage, Mountain King, Rifle Caster. You have AOE to counter their army. You have the Dryads to counter their casters, especially if you have some Fairy Dragons in there too. Although probably not as advantageous if they have a lot of rifles. You're countering his army very nicely, and you have tier 3 where he only has tier 2, and you have staffs. So that's a fight that you should win, but it's just a question of getting to that place. And you saw that Nilknarth had very good timing in terms of making that big push right when a lesser Night Elf player wouldn't have had his tech, or he wouldn't have had quite as many units, or he wouldn't have used his staffs as well, and Nilknarth would have ended up killing that expansion and almost assuredly winning the game with his resource advantage. So it's just a matter of leveling the playing field in terms of resources and leading up to that big fight at the end. So those are all general concepts. On Terenas Stand, you have to bear in mind things, like making sure that you get your expansion up, that you can, do it with just your Tree of Life and a Shredder if you choose to do it that way. Making sure that you're dealing with the Zeppelin possibility, because a human player can be very, very annoying if he gets the Zeppelin, and if he gets a Shredder, more than one Shredders, he can use those to attack you too. And so you want to be proactive about getting those Goblin Laboratory units, making sure that you're using those to your advantage in the situation of Terenas Stand. And you also want to make sure that you're using your Scout Wisps very effectively, because, as I mentioned earlier, the human player has a ton of options on this map. They can expand in any number of places, or they can do standard things, or they can tower rush you in several ways. You just want to make sure that you know what's coming. And the Dark Ranger is one overall solid hero on this map, because it can generally speaking counter or provide at least some kind of a counter to most of the things a human player will throw at you. So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys, and not too similar to the last one. I think I talked about a number of different comments, or a number of different concepts with regards to this particular way in which this matchup can play out. Next time around, I'll have a totally different commentary for you guys, but hopefully you guys learned some stuff from this. So this has been Balance from WCRreplays.com. I will see you guys next time.